Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're exploring what has to be one of the absolute greatest what-ifs in motorsport history. We're going to look at a totally forgotten technological marvel straight out of 1950 South America. It's this wild story of engineering ambition, state-sponsored industrialization, and how just one single political shift literally altered global racing forever. This is a tale that takes us from the absolute pinnacle of motorsport all the way down to a forgotten scrap heap and then back again.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we think of legendary, game-changing V8 engines in motorsport, right? Our minds immediately jump to the famous Cosworth engines of the late 1960s. I mean, they set the gold standard. But what if I told you that a state-run aerospace initiative in Argentina almost beat Cosworth to a revolutionary modular V8 engine by a full decade? It sounds completely absurd. I know, it kind of sounds like fiction. But the metal was actually cast, the tests were run, and this engine was very, very real. So to understand how this even happened, we've got to rewind to 1953 and look at this massive state-run complex called IAM. That stands for Industrias Aeronáuticas y Mecánicas del Estado, located down in Córdoba, Argentina. Now, this was not your average car factory. Driven by a unique economic model of that era where the state controlled basic manufacturing, IAM produced absolutely everything. We're talking airplanes, motorcycles, heavy tractors, heck, even washing machines and kitchen blenders. But somewhere between churning out household blenders and military aircraft, they decided to build a fiberglass sports car, the Instatec Grand Sport. Now, this sports car actually had pretty humble beginnings. During the post-war period, Argentina received this massive shipment of four-cylinder Porsche engines. But here's the kicker. These were originally intended for heavy industrial use. We're talking water pumps and electric generators. Well, someone at IAM realized, hey, these could be adapted for passenger cars, which led to the first Instatec Grand Sport. But the engineers there, they weren't satisfied with repurposed water pumps. They had a much, much more radical ambition. They wanted to build a massive, locally designed, completely in-house V8 power plant to rip out those imported Porsche engines and truly show the world what Argentinian engineering could do. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer visionary genius behind it, which belongs to an engineer named Ambrosio Taravella. Back in 1954, Taravella didn't just design a standard V8, he utilized this incredibly advanced concept known as modular engine architecture. Cast in lightweight aluminum, this basic structure theoretically allowed the factory to configure blocks in line or in a V shape for 2, 4, 6, or even 8 cylinders, all using interchangeable components. I mean, this was brilliantly advanced thinking for the era. It shared some similarities with Hans Lidvinka's famous Tatra V8, but remember, this was designed and built entirely from scratch in South America. And the visual proof of this beast is just staggering. It's an absolute monster of an engine. You see, because IMA was an aeronautical factory first and foremost, Taravella heavily borrowed from aviation technology. Right at the front, there's this massive aviation-inspired axial turbine used specifically for air cooling the engine. And right above that, a setup of 4 double-barreled Solex carburetors, designed to give this engine highly efficient, relentless fuel delivery. Honestly, it looks like something meant to fly, not just drive down the street.
And the numbers completely back up the ambition here. Let's look at the hard data from their laboratory testing in April 1954. This was a 3,000 cubic centimeter 4-stroke engine. In the test lab, they ran this thing continuously for 50 grueling hours at 2,000 RPM without a single failure. When they really pushed it, it produced an impressive 116 to 120 horsepower at just 4,300 to 4,450 RPM. Stuffed inside the lightweight fiberglass body of the Instatec Grand Sport, this power plant generated enough thrust to push the car to a top speed of 170 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, for a locally produced prototype in the mid-1950s, those were incredibly serious performance figures. And this brilliantly illustrates just how seriously this project was taken. Take a look at the man behind the wheel testing the open-top prototype in February 1954 at the Buenos Aires Autodrome. That is none other than Formula One legend and world champion Juan Manuel Fangio. Having the greatest racing driver on the planet testing your prototype, that gives your engineering project ultimate undeniable credibility. And he wasn't just there for a quick photo op either. He was really pushing the machine to see what it could actually do. With state funding fully backing it, IMA treated this as a tremendously high-profile project. These V8 prototypes weren't just tested locally and kept a secret. They were proudly sent all across the globe. They made appearances at major auto shows in Paris, Torino, and New York. drawing intense international curiosity from major publications like Life magazine and Auto Week. It was this powerful symbol of industrial potential, reaching the hands of both a world champion driver and Argentina's president at the time, General Perón. That international tour firmly cemented its elite status on the world stage. Let's move along and see how this builds, because the momentum was just incredible. The prototypes were ordered in 1953, and by 1954, the engine was built, thoroughly tested, and integrated into the cars. They were scheduled to make this grand triumphant debut at the Paris Motor Show in 1955, but history had other plans. In 1955, a coup d'etat in Argentina, known as the Revolution Libertadora, resulted in a massive government shift. Operations at the state-run IME factory were drastically interrupted, the Paris trip was immediately canceled, and all advanced competition developments were just halted overnight. Just like that, the whole shebang, this audacious V8 project, was archived and abandoned. The cars effectively disappeared into history. Now, IME's automotive production did survive for a short while longer, but the focus shifted entirely away from sports cars to a rugged, highly successful utility truck called the Rostrojero. Eventually, the factory shut down its automotive dreams altogether. The original Instatec Grand Sports with those Porsche engines, they slowly died out across the country due to a lack of spare parts. But the two magnificent V8 prototypes, they were completely lost. In fact, for 40 long years, the whereabouts of these engineering marvels were completely unknown. People widely presumed they were destroyed. I mean, just think about that for a second. A revolutionary modular V8 engine that had rubbed shoulders with Juan Manuel Fangio on an international stage was left rusting in absolute oblivion, sitting in a scrap pile in a dusty old Buenos Aires workshop for 40 decades. 40 years! Until someone actually found one. Yeah, only one single prototype survived those 40 years of neglect. A classic car enthusiast named Hector Cordero was literally digging through old scrap iron when he discovered the decaying, cracked plastic remains of the Instatec Grand Sport. And remarkably, the original Taravella V8 was still sleeping inside it. It took Cordero more than 4 years of painstaking, dedicated work to restore the vehicle. Miraculously, he brought that original engine back to life, and the car eventually returned to the track at the very same Buenos Aires Autodrome where Fangio had driven it 41 years prior. The incredible survival of this car allows us to understand its true lost potential. If we look at the international FIA rules for Formula One at the time, the engine limit was set at 2.5 liters. The AME V8 was 3.0 liters. So if Ambrosio Taravella had been allowed to continue his work, all he had to do was simply reduce the engine's displacement to meet those FIA regulations. Actually, scratch that. It wouldn't just meet regulations. It would have been a highly advanced, modular aluminum V8 engine ready for the track. They would have been directly competing against the silver arrows of Mercedes and the red cars of Ferrari right during the absolute prime of Juan Manuel Fangio's career. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. If politics hadn't intervened in 1955 and this project had been allowed to mature, would Argentina have dominated the golden age of Formula One? Would the entire automotive center of the world have shifted south? We'll never know for sure, but this incredible surviving prototype reminds us of how one sudden historical shift can change the trajectory of global motorsport forever. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your curiosity revved up for the next one.